On Christmas gathering, everyone got gifts with handwritten notes, except me. When I asked why, my mom said, "Because you've given us nothing this year, not even respect." I just nodded, went upstairs, and came back down with a box they forgot existed. When they opened it, my sister gasped, my dad turned pale, and my aunt whispered, "You didn't really keep that, did you?" I, 32M, thought this Christmas would be different. After months of therapy and working on myself, I convinced myself that maybe this year my family would finally see me as more than just the disappointment who moved across the country for work. I should have known better. The living room buzzed with holiday cheer when I arrived at my childhood home. My sister had flown in from Seattle with her husband and 2 kids. My aunt brought her usual array of expensive wines. Everyone seemed genuinely happy to see each other, and for a moment, I felt that familiar warmth of belonging. But then came the gift exchange. One by one, beautifully wrapped presents emerged from under the tree. Each came with a handwritten note expressing love, gratitude, and cherished memories. My sister received a photo album filled with family pictures and a note about how proud everyone was of her promotion. My aunt got a custom jewelry box with an inscription thanking her for being the family's anchor after Grandma passed. Even the kids received personalized gifts with notes about their accomplishments in school. I sat there watching, waiting for my name to be called. The pile under the tree grew smaller. My stomach started to knot as the reality set in. When the last gift was distributed and everyone was admiring their thoughtful presents, I finally worked up the courage to ask. Mom looked up from her new gardening tools, and her expression shifted to something cold and familiar. She told me they hadn't gotten me anything because I'd given them nothing this year, not even respect. The room fell silent. Dad avoided eye contact, suddenly very interested in his new fishing gear. My sister busied herself with helping the kids open their toys. I just nodded. What else could I do? Argue? Make a scene in front of the children? I'd learned years ago that fighting back only made things worse. Instead, I excused myself and headed upstairs to my old bedroom. The room hadn't changed much since high school. Same blue walls, same twin bed, same desk where I'd spent countless hours studying to earn the scholarship that got me into college. But I wasn't there for nostalgia. I was there for the box I'd hidden in my closet 15 years ago. It was exactly where I'd left it, pushed behind old winter coats and forgotten textbooks. The shoebox was heavier than I remembered, worn at the edges but still intact. My hands trembled slightly as I picked it up. I'd almost thrown it away so many times over the years, but something always stopped me. Maybe it was intuition. Maybe it was just stubbornness. I carried the box downstairs, where everyone had moved to the kitchen for Mom's famous hot chocolate. The conversation died when I entered. They all looked at me expectantly, probably wondering if I was going to storm out like I had during Thanksgiving 3 years ago. Instead, I set the box on the kitchen island and told them I had something for them after all. I explained that I'd been saving it for the right moment, and apparently, today was that day. Dad asked what was in it, his voice carrying a nervous edge I rarely heard. I told him they'd have to open it to find out. Mom stepped forward first, always the curious one. She lifted the lid slowly, and I watched her face change from confusion to recognition to something approaching horror. Inside were dozens of photographs, letters, and documents I'd collected during my senior year of high school. Back when I was 18 and naive enough to think my family's secrets were my burden to carry. My sister gasped when she saw the top photograph. It showed Dad with a woman who definitely wasn't Mom, taken outside a motel about 20 miles from our house. The timestamp showed it was from the summer before my senior year, right around the time my parents were going to marriage counseling. Dad's face went completely pale as Mom pulled out more photos. There were receipts from expensive dinners and hotel stays. Credit card statements showing charges to jewelry stores for items Mom never received. Text message printouts that made it clear this wasn't a one-time mistake. But the photos were just the beginning. Underneath were bank statements showing the money Dad had been siphoning from my college fund to pay for his affair. Money that was supposed to cover my tuition and living expenses. Money that forced me to work 3 jobs just to get through school. My aunt whispered the question I'd been waiting 15 years to hear. She asked if I'd really kept all of this. I told her I had, and that there was more where it came from. The room felt frozen in time. Mom sat down heavily, still clutching one of the photos. Dad tried to speak, but nothing came out. My sister looked between our parents like she was seeing them for the first time. I explained that I discovered everything by accident during my senior year. Dad had asked me to grab some papers from his office, and I'd stumbled across a folder he'd forgotten to hide. At first, I thought about confronting him. Then I thought about telling Mom. But ultimately, I decided to document everything instead. Every time Dad claimed he was working late, I followed him. Every suspicious credit card charge, I investigated. Every lie he told about his whereabouts, I verified. For 6 months, I built a comprehensive case against my own father. Mom asked why I'd never said anything. The question hung in the air like smoke from a dying fire. I told her the truth, that I'd been 18, scared, and hoping it would just stop on its own. I'd convinced myself that keeping their marriage together was more important than the truth. But then Dad had stolen from my college fund to finance his double life. Money my grandmother had left specifically for my education. Money that represented years of her working double shifts as a nurse, just so I could have opportunities she never had. That's when I decided to keep everything as insurance. Dad finally found his voice and asked what I wanted. The question sounded exactly like what it was, a man trying to negotiate his way out of consequences. I told him I didn't want anything. I just wanted them to understand why I'd distanced myself from the family over the years. Every time they'd criticized my life choices, every time they'd made me feel like the problem child, every time they'd acted like I was ungrateful, I'd known the truth about who they really were. It's hard to respect people when you know they're living a lie. My sister asked if the affair was still going on. Dad shook his head quickly, claiming it had ended years ago. But I pulled out the most recent photos I'd taken just 6 months ago during my last visit home. Same woman, different motel. Some habits never change. The silence that followed was deafening. Mom stood up and walked to the window, staring out at the snow-covered yard where we used to build snowmen together. Dad sat with his head in his hands. My sister looked like she was trying to solve a puzzle with missing pieces. I told them I was sharing this now because I was tired of being treated like the family disappointment. Tired of being blamed for being distant when they were the ones living dishonestly. Tired of watching them give thoughtful gifts to everyone else while treating me like an afterthought. Mom turned around and asked if this was why I'd moved so far away. I confirmed it was part of it. Hard to feel at home in a house built on lies. Hard to trust people who'd been deceiving everyone for years. Hard to love people who'd stolen from their own child to fund their betrayal. Dad tried to explain that he'd paid the money back to my college fund eventually. I acknowledged that he had, but pointed out it was 2 years too late. 2 years of me eating ramen noodles and working nights at a gas station. 2 years of wondering if I'd be able to afford textbooks. 2 years of stress that nearly broke me. The kids had wandered into the living room to play with their new toys, blissfully unaware of the adult drama unfolding in the kitchen. Their laughter felt surreal against the heavy silence among the adults. My aunt asked what happened next. I told her that was up to them. I'd kept their secrets for 15 years, but I was done being the keeper of their shame. If they wanted to continue pretending everything was perfect, that was their choice. But they couldn't expect me to participate in the charade anymore. Mom asked if I was going to expose them publicly. I assured her I wasn't interested in destroying their reputation or hurting the grandchildren. I just wanted honesty within our family. I wanted them to stop pretending I was the problem when they'd been the ones living duplicitous lives. Dad asked if we could talk privately. I declined. I'd spent too many years keeping private conversations about family secrets. Everything that needed to be said could be said in front of everyone. My sister finally spoke up, asking how long I'd been planning this moment. I explained that I hadn't planned it at all. I'd actually hoped to never need these photos. But after years of being treated like the black sheep, years of criticism and judgment, years of being made to feel like I owed them something I could never repay, I'd reached my breaking point. The irony wasn't lost on me. They'd accused me of giving them nothing, not even respect. But I'd given them 15 years of silence. 15 years of protecting their marriage and their reputation. 15 years of carrying their secrets while they painted me as the ungrateful child. Mom sat back down at the kitchen table and asked what I wanted from them now. I told her I wanted the same thing I'd always wanted, to be treated with the same love and respect they showed everyone else. To not be blamed for every family tension. To not be made to feel guilty for creating boundaries with people who'd proven they couldn't be trusted. Dad asked if there was any way to move forward from this. I said that depended on them. If they were willing to acknowledge the years of hurt they'd caused, if they were willing to stop scapegoating me for their own problems, If they were willing to build something real instead of maintaining a facade, then maybe we could try. But I made it clear that the days of me pretending everything was fine were over. The days of me absorbing their criticism while protecting their secrets were finished. If they wanted a relationship with me, it would have to be based on honesty and mutual respect. My sister asked if she could see the rest of the contents in the box. I told her she could, but warned her that some of it might be difficult to process. There were years of documentation, including evidence that this pattern of behavior extended beyond just the affair. As she went through the papers, her expression grew more troubled. Bank statements showing gambling debts Dad had hidden from Mom. Credit reports revealing loans taken out in Mom's name without her knowledge. A whole financial house of cards that could have destroyed our family's stability. Mom asked why I'd kept all of this to myself for so long. I explained that I'd been trying to protect everyone, including them. I'd thought that if I just kept quiet and stayed away, maybe they'd figure out their problems on their own. Maybe they'd choose to be better people without me having to force their hand. But watching them give heartfelt gifts to everyone else while excluding me had crystallized something for me. I realized I'd been enabling their behavior by staying silent. I'd been allowing them to treat me poorly while protecting them from consequences. Dad asked if I'd ever considered that maybe my distance had contributed to the family problems. I acknowledged that my physical distance might have affected family dynamics, but pointed out that emotional distance was a reasonable response to discovering your parents were living lies. The afternoon stretched on with more difficult conversations. We talked about trust, about family loyalty, about the difference between keeping the peace and enabling dysfunction. It wasn't pleasant, but it was more honest than any conversation we'd had in years. By evening, when it was time for me to head back to my hotel, something had shifted. Not resolved, not healed, but shifted. For the first time in 15 years, we were all operating with the same information. The secrets were out in the open. Mom hugged me goodbye, and for the first time since I was a teenager, it felt genuine. She whispered that she was sorry for how they'd treated me today, and for a lot of other days too. She said they had work to do as a family, and she hoped I'd be patient while they figured things out. Dad shook my hand, which was more physical affection than we'd shared in years. He told me he understood why I'd kept my distance, and that he was sorry for putting me in that position. He said he'd been hoping I'd forgotten about everything, but he realized now that was naive. My sister walked me to my car and asked if I thought our family could recover from this. I told her I didn't know, but I thought honesty was a better foundation than pretense. She agreed, and said she'd probably be calling me in the next few weeks to process everything. As I drove back to my hotel, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years when leaving a family gathering. Peace. Not happiness exactly, but a sense of completion. The weight I'd been carrying for 15 years had finally been shared. Update 1. 3 weeks later, I got a call from Mom. She told me that she and Dad were going back to couples therapy, but this time with full disclosure about everything. She'd also started individual counseling to work through her own issues with trust and communication. More surprisingly, she'd talked to a financial advisor about protecting herself from any future financial deceptions. She'd discovered that Dad had been hiding more than just affair-related expenses, and she was taking steps to ensure her financial security. She asked if I'd be willing to join them for a family therapy session via video call. She said the therapist had suggested that healing the family dynamic would require input from everyone, including me. I agreed, with the condition that I could leave the session if it became unproductive. Dad had been staying at his brother's house while they worked things out. Mom said he was finally being completely honest about the extent of his deceptions, which was painful but necessary. She admitted that part of her had always known something was wrong, but she'd chosen to ignore the signs rather than face the truth. Update 2. The family therapy session was intense but productive. The therapist helped us understand how family secrets create unhealthy dynamics that affect everyone, even those not directly involved in keeping the secrets. Dad apologized not just for the affair and financial deceptions, but for putting me in the position of carrying that burden as a teenager. He acknowledged that his actions had stolen more than money from my college fund. They'd stolen my ability to trust my own family. Mom apologized for making me the scapegoat for family tensions that had nothing to do with me. She realized that criticizing me had been easier than addressing the real problems in her marriage. My sister shared that she'd always sensed something was off in our family dynamic, but couldn't pinpoint what it was. She said my distance had made more sense once she understood what I'd been dealing with. The therapist suggested we work on rebuilding trust slowly, with clear boundaries and expectations. She recommended that I maintain my physical distance while we worked on emotional reconnection, which felt manageable. Update 3. 6 months later, our family dynamic has changed significantly. Dad moved back home after completing an intensive therapy program and making full financial restitution for all his hidden spending. He's also attending a support group for people with gambling addictions, which was apparently a bigger issue than any of us had realized. Mom has become more assertive about her needs and boundaries. She's also made an effort to understand my perspective and validate the hurt I experienced. She sent several heartfelt letters apologizing for specific incidents where she'd made me feel unwelcome or criticized. My sister and I have grown closer. She's visited me twice in the past 6 months, and we talk regularly. She said that understanding the full context of our family situation has helped her make sense of a lot of childhood memories that never quite added up. The most significant change is in how we communicate. Instead of surface-level pleasantries hiding deeper resentments, we're practicing direct, honest conversations. It's uncomfortable sometimes, but it's real in a way our family interactions never were before. I won't pretend everything is perfect. Trust rebuilds slowly, and there are still moments of tension and awkwardness. But for the first time in 15 years, I feel like I'm part of a family that's based on truth rather than pretense. Last month, I agreed to spend Thanksgiving with them. This time, when gift-giving happened, I received a photo album filled with pictures from my childhood and college graduation, along with a handwritten note acknowledging everything I'd given the family over the years, including my silence and protection. But more importantly, we spent the day talking honestly about our lives, our struggles, and our hopes for the future. No secrets, no hidden agendas, no walking on eggshells. Just a family learning how to be real with each other for the first time.